I couldn't stay silent any longer. Every day, I tried to find a way out, but all I saw was corruption, racism, and injustice at every turn. I was one of those who had always been silent, but when I learned how far these evil forces had come, I realized it was time for change. I'm Layla Green, and this is the story of how I discovered the bitter truth about my company that promised to be inclusive, and how I decided to fight. Are you ready to see how deeply these wounds were embedded in the system? Then stay with me. I could feel my heart clenching every time I looked at the people around me. My name was Layla Green, and I was a senior analyst at Exotech, one of the largest technology companies in the United States. I seemed to have everything: a good job, prestige, and stability. But every time I walked into the office, I felt that something was wrong with this perfect picture. Something very important. It all started with a simple incident. We were having a meeting to discuss the next stage of product development. I was one of the few people who constantly offered new ideas, trying to find creative solutions to complex problems. And one day, when I shared a new concept, one of the executives, Jake, didn't even look in my direction. This was commonplace. Everyone knew that my ideas were just words to fill in the pauses in meetings. But this time I couldn't take it. "Don't worry, it's normal, Layla," one of my colleagues told me after the meeting. "You know we're only here for the statistics." The woman's words, although said in jest, hit me harder than I could have imagined. I began to pay attention to how I was treated at every turn. I had never noticed it before, but the more I delved into it, the more I felt that I and my colleagues with the same problems were simply ignored. We were invisible, just a part of the machine that works for corporate success while the top executives enjoy their profits. And then one day, I came across something that made me really worried. We've always had a high level of confidentiality in our company, but this time I got access to unauthorized reports, the ones with the worst comments from our employees. I opened one of them and saw a whole series of anonymous reviews. Among them were some strange comments. "We are ignored based on our appearance. We can't move forward because we don't fit the corporate image." Among the employees I had known for years, only a small group had a chance for promotion. But why? Why couldn't I get a promotion, even though my work was impeccable? I was one of the best in my field, but there was always another person in my place who looked right. That night I couldn't sleep. My head was full of thoughts. Why didn't I see this before? How could I remain indifferent to what was happening around me? The answer was obvious, because I was afraid. I was afraid of losing my job, my position, my place. But at that moment I realized that I could no longer stand by. I decided to act. And if only I knew how it would turn out. In the morning, I learned that the CEO of our company, Daniel Lake, was going to conduct an audit. He did not disclose any details, but said it would be something serious. I had no idea that this inspection would be the first step towards discovering the true nature of our company. But when it became known that he wanted to check everything without showing his real identity, I felt that this could be my chance. What if this was my opportunity to show what the real state of affairs looked like from the inside? I began to realize more and more that the company that promised inclusiveness was actually just a big facade. And I had to be ready for any truth, even if it meant standing up to the system that was keeping me down. What I learned the following week surpassed all my ideas of what the company looked like from the inside. It was the beginning of unraveling a tangle of lies that had been hidden under a layer of corporate politics for years. Daniel's plan was simple and shocking at the same time. He decided to leave his title of CEO behind and go undercover. He would become one of us, ordinary employees. If any of us had guessed who he really was, we would not have been able to find out the whole truth. But this time, he had the right to be perfect. He was ready to become invisible. As soon as I found out about his plan, my thoughts began to whirl like a storm. I felt that this could be the moment when everything would change. But I didn't realize that these changes would affect me. I was ready to act, ready to reveal all the undercurrents of this mask we had been wearing for years. Daniel's steps became my hope that we could all make a difference. But the more I watched, the more I realized that it would not be a simple unmasking. It would be a tough fight. And so, Daniel became James, a new employee who had only recently joined the team. He started working in the warehouse, where the lowest positions in the company were located. At first glance, he was an ordinary technician, but I immediately felt that something was wrong. As a person who has been working in the company for a long time, I noticed that no one even paid attention to James until he started asking questions about fairness and started working to the limit of his capabilities. But it was not just a test for him. It was a test for all of us. I started to notice how James changed the atmosphere around him. During one of his workdays, I was standing by the desk in the office when I saw his attention directed to the lowest paid employees. He started talking to them, asking them how they were feeling, why they were so tired, and why they weren't getting the recognition they deserved for their work. "We're not important," said one woman, a cleaner who was taking a break. Her words sounded like being labeled invisible at the heart of the system. It was something I had felt for years, but never dared to say out loud. I tried to hold back, but my heart was beating faster and faster. All these years I had been working in an environment where our efforts and emotions did not matter. I was chosen not for my merits, but for my appearance, for how many people knew me. And now James, disguised as a low-level employee, has simply become the only voice of those we all ignored. He saw this invisibility. That's when I realized I had to help him uncover the truth, even if it meant risking my position. I became his ally, even though I realized that it could have ended very badly for both of us. With each new day, I watched as he, James, began to reveal what was really going on in the company. He found his place among the cleaners, among those who were never in the public eye. He received information from employees whom we, the managers, constantly ignored. And what he learned was shocking. Everything he saw was more devastating than I could have ever imagined. "No one listens to us," they said. And I knew it wasn't just words. This was their reality, and James was now the only one who could change it. This was just the beginning. I felt the pressure building on me. I began to see this company with different eyes that could no longer turn a blind eye to injustice. And now I was ready to act. I could no longer allow this system to lead us to decline. We could not go back. We were all used to the fake smiles, those sly faces at meetings and business lunches. But in reality, it was much worse than I could have imagined. One day, I went to the floor where the younger employees worked. We often passed each other, but I never paid much attention. These were the people who kept our company afloat, but we, the senior managers, never gave them a chance to advance. All these years, we only pretended to be happy about their successes, but in reality, no one cared who was behind the company's great achievements. One day, I went to a meeting. I was an ordinary technical employee, and I had no important role, but I was able to hear what was going on at the real level. And then, among the usual conversations, I heard something that stunned me. One of the heads of the finance department said that in order to be promoted, you need not only to have good results, but also to maintain the right look. And when a colleague from another team raised the issue of talent and skills, he was told, "Maybe this guy is good at his job, but he lacks that special look, you know?" I could barely contain myself. "What do you mean? How is that possible? People who give their whole soul to their work can't even be noticed because they don't fit corporate standards?" I could no longer ignore it. With each new day, I saw how the system of selectivity kept people in place. People with different skin color or social status were simply rejected, their opportunities blocked at every turn. And this was exactly what I hadn't paid attention to before. But, as it turned out, the real revelation came when Daniel, the same CEO, working undercover, began to communicate with those who usually remained invisible. And his observations came as a rude shock to the entire company. One day, I came to a regular meeting and saw Daniel, pretending to be James, engage in conversation with several employees who worked at the bottom of the company, including cleaners and technicians. He started asking questions that I didn't have an answer to. Why couldn't we build a company where each of us, regardless of our status, could feel valued? "We're all a team here," one of them said, and I felt the importance of those words pierce me to the core. But then James, I already knew it was Daniel, asked why these people were not getting opportunities for growth. This question remained unanswered. I realized that for him and me, for everyone working behind the scenes, this was the last opportunity to change something. But the most interesting thing happened a few days later. I worked with several colleagues in the evening shift. Everyone said it was a hard place to work, but what made it even worse was that they couldn't change anything. One of our senior employees, John, said, "We all have to be willing to make sacrifices here. It's not about us, it's about the product." I was scared. That's what we actually told ourselves every day, that it's just about the business. But when I looked at those faces, I realized that it was not just about business. It was a complete loss of humanity. I couldn't stand by any longer. If the company really wants to change the culture, if Daniel really wants to build an inclusive environment, then we have to act now. Right now. But how? And who among us will be able to give the truth to people like us and make sure we are heard? At that moment, I realized that my fears were only the beginning. And it was only the first part of a great struggle for justice. We had to change not only the company's approach, but also the very nature of its culture. I took action. Together with Daniel, we decided to create a system that allowed all employees to speak up anonymously, without fear of repercussions. But even with this opportunity, we couldn't stop with just words. Real changes were needed. The days spent undercover began to turn into indescribably difficult weeks. Daniel, now James, was sinking deeper and deeper into the reality of the company that we had also carefully hidden behind the impeccable corporate facade. Those with big ambitions wanted to change the world with the latest technology, but they forgot about the people behind those innovations. During one of my evening shifts, I happened to be sitting next to James as we discussed the next steps. He looked tired, but there was a fire of determination in his eyes. I could feel that something big and important was about to happen. And that's when he said something I couldn't forget. "Layla, I see the system hitting us, and it is destroying everything we have created from within." These words penetrated deep into my heart. I realized that James and I had become the only force trying to break through the wall of silence and indifference that had been built around us. In the meantime, James, Daniel, continued to work among us, observing and collecting testimonies from the staff. And more people began to open their hearts to him. "I've been working here for 7 years, and I don't even think I've been noticed. Although I get good reviews, I have never been promoted," one of the cleaners, Lisa, told me. She had been with the company since the beginning, but her career prospects were limited by her status in the system. James and I became sensitive to every word, every conversation. It turned out that we were not the only ones who saw these problems. Our colleagues also wanted change. They were just afraid to speak up. In addition, I began to realize how deeply discrimination was widespread in our company. Highly professional people, like Aisha from the marketing department, often didn't get any chances for promotion because their appearance or background didn't meet the so-called standards of a successful employee. All of my friends who worked in lower positions complained about the same thing. "We are not noticed. We are not heard." But the worst part was that the management, even when they heard these conversations, did nothing. It was so commonplace that no one even tried to change the situation. I was shocked to see one of our top managers laughing outright when he talked about the need to hire people who look the way we want them to look. It wasn't just a coincidence, it was company policy. And then my moment came. I decided not to wait any longer and come out of the shadows. Faced with this truth, I knew that nothing would change if I remained just an observer. Yes, I was part of the system, but that didn't give me the right to remain silent. I had to change things. While James continued to observe, I started organizing internal meetings. Gathering a few people from different departments, I began to openly discuss these issues. Our voices needed to be heard, and I knew that this required more than just ideas, it required action. I suggested creating a support group that could be used to collect anonymous complaints and suggestions. This was the first attempt to break the silence that had prevailed for many years. I began to feel the system cracking with every step. And when it became obvious to everyone, I realized that we could change this company if we acted together. Gradually, I noticed that more and more employees were joining us. Their eyes would light up when they heard that we would no longer be silent. Their support gave me strength, even though I realized that in order to change the culture, we had to face a lot of resistance. Those who were not ready for change began to create obstacles. They tried to force us to go back to the old ways, but this time we couldn't go back. In the next few weeks, we first tried to disclose these problems at a general company meeting. I remember the moment when James spoke at the meeting and all eyes were on him. Everyone knew who he was, but none of us dared to reveal the secret. Everyone listened to him share what really happened, and I realized that this moment was crucial. I could feel how every word that came out of his mouth changed the atmosphere in the room. We were no longer part of a company that hides the truth. We became those who have the right to justice, those who are ready to fight for equality. From that moment on, I realized that this was only the beginning. Although there were many difficulties ahead, I knew that when we united, we could change everything. The following days were the most difficult of my life. After James revealed his true identity, everything in the company changed. It seemed as if the whole house we had been building for years was crumbling before our eyes. But in fact, we were on the verge of a major transformation. The problems we had been hiding had finally come to the surface, and it was no longer possible to remain indifferent. Daniel, speaking openly in front of everyone, became a real symbol of change. It was a moment when each of us, regardless of our role, could feel that we were heard. I stood among the audience and saw understanding shine in the eyes of my colleagues, those who had been silent for years. They knew this was a chance to change the future. I, Daniel Lake, the CEO of Exotech, have been working undercover in the company for the past few weeks to understand what is really going on. I've seen things that I never noticed because I was too far away. I've seen how we've been convinced that we're on top of the world, but we've actually forgotten the most important thing. We've forgotten the people who make this company great, he said, looking around the room. His words were hard to listen to, but they were necessary. He shared what he saw during his underground time at the company, how many of us felt invisible, how even the best employees couldn't get a chance because of their appearance or background. And he didn't stop there. Daniel announced that it was time for change. We're going through a major transformation. We're creating a new policy for promoting and advancing careers based not on connections or social standards, but on true merit, he continued. We are creating a system where everyone, no matter who they are, has an equal chance to be heard. The room filled with applause. Some employees were crying. Those who had been feeling overwhelmed and neglected for years could feel the change coming. It was the moment when everyone in the room realized that they would no longer be silent. After Daniel's speech, there was one more important announcement. He called Lisa, the very cleaner who first opened my eyes to the company's problems, and gave her the floor. Everyone was surprised when Lisa, a young woman who had been with the company for over a decade, shared her story. She told us how she tried every day not to give up and do her best, but because of her role in the company, she never had a chance. Everyone was impressed by her courage. We have forgotten what is important, Lisa said, looking up at us. We have forgotten about justice, about equality, about opportunities. Today, I stand here, not as a cleaner, but as part of a great change. This moment was a turning point. The meeting was filled not only with applause, but also with a strong desire to change the company. It was the moment when we all became one. I was no longer just an employee who silently accepted my role in the system. I was part of a movement for justice, for equality, and for every employee to have their voice heard. Daniel announced several important initiatives that were to take effect immediately. Revision of the promotion policy. From now on, promotion in the company will depend on real merit and results, not on how well you fit in with the look or acquaintances. An open and anonymous channel for complaints. All employees will be able to raise their concerns without fear of reprisal. Cultural training for management. Every manager in the company will undergo mandatory training on inclusiveness, ethics, and empathy to change the way they approach people. Equality policy. By working to attract different groups, the company aimed to be open to everyone without any restrictions based on appearance or social status. These steps, although seemingly simple at first glance, were a big step towards change. We all knew that achieving the goal would not be easy, but Daniel was ready to take on the challenge, and together we were on the path to great change. And so, when we announced the first steps towards change, I realized that everything I dreamed of, a company where everyone feels valued, could become a reality. This moment was only the beginning. The real test was just beginning. We were ready for it. Although there were still difficulties ahead, I was no longer afraid. Now we were all together, with one common desire, to change the world around us, one step at a time.